Can't believe I've never made a video like this before, just responding to the question, what is my favorite time in history to talk about? Obviously, there are several different eras to discuss, and there's also many events in each one of those eras, so it's kind of a little bit difficult. I think I'm just going to go down the general timeline and discuss what I like and what I don't, and to be quite honest, there's probably going to be some surprising ones in there. There's definitely, if you watch enough main channel videos, there's probably going to be some things you can guess right now, but there's a lot of surprising things that I might say. I might upset a couple people, actually, we'll see. But to start things off, let's just go with prehistory. So the period, I'm reading off Google right here, the period between the appearance of humans and the invention of writing systems. Now for me, well, that's kind of like Stone Age too, the period that lasted 3.3 million years ago to 5,000 years ago. That stuff, believe it or not, I love. That actually might be, this is a little early in the video to say it, but my second favorite time in history to kind of talk about, whether it's discussing the memes or just having discussions about it, because there's so much openness to what went down. Like, we don't know at all, really. I mean, there's a lot of historians and what are they called? The science about this topic. There's limited information. They say human civilization started like 4,000 years ago, kind of. That's kind of gray. Sorry, not 4,000 years ago, 4,000 BC, maybe a little bit further back. But we find more and more evidence that there's probably some pretty civilized humans that were before that. It's just very interesting, because also we find new stuff. It seems like every single year about that era, just the Stone Age, and I mean, maybe the Stone Age is supposed to be referring to technically before civilization, but I don't know. I really like that stuff. The basic way that the human species was able to out-evolution everyone else, just by throwing a damn rock. Like, it's as simple as that. There's all sorts of, weird theories. You got to be careful, because obviously it gets into pretty conspiracy territory here. Is it really conspiracy territory if it's like, if we're all like we don't know at all? I mean, I don't know, maybe, I guess, but everyone's got all these different ideas about what happens. And I think that's part of the fun of it. Part of the fun about that time period in history is how loose it is, you know what I mean? And everyone's got a very interesting opinion about what happened in that time period. So who knows? I don't have enough, evidence to really to discuss what I think. But I mean, I kind of talk about it here and there. But anyways, let's move on. Let's talk about the Bronze Age. Love talking about the Bronze. I'm gonna be honest. We're talking like 5,000 to 1,400 years ago. The biggest thing when I think of the Bronze Age is the Sea People and how we don't know anything about them. And you're gonna notice a theme about this when it comes to obviously the early history stuff. There's so much that we don't know. But the Bronze Age, I mean, I enjoy talking about it. I enjoy, again, somewhat of the mystery behind the Sea People, but there's other things that aren't as big of mysteries for that time period. It's okay. Not one of my favorites. Yeah, it's all right. I'm going to just straight on move on to the Iron Age, which was the period that lasted between 1200 BC and 500 BC. So, yes, this is one of those subjects that I kind of learn more and more about every single week, and I just pray that things get hammered into my head. Believe it or not, for me, I do not, well, I think everyone knows this that know me. I do not have a photogenic memory, and the way that I learn things and the way that I am able to do things, like how I learn how to do things, is I just have to pound and pound and pound whatever it is into my head, pound facts or pound repetition. Like, it's just so bad. I kind of hate that I'm like this. The only way I learn is if I get shown the same, facts or stories or historical evidence over and over and over again until it gets retained. That's how I'm trying to learn Spanish. That's how I'm trying to, I also play volleyball. That's how I play sports. I just have to do it all the time. That's how I am. Some people are so lucky they can just pick things up. So the Bronze Age is definitely one of those topics that I feel like I'm learning more and more about. I still have a lot to go. But yeah, let's just jump that into the classical era. The big one that jumps out here is Rome. Now, here's the surprising thing. I am not really a Roma-boo. I like the memes about, the pro-Rome stuff. I like Rome. I like discussing Rome, the topic of Rome, but I am really not knowledgeable about that subject. I learn about it, but I think it's just because I come across so many, obviously in the history community, I come across so many like mega fans of Rome. So I look at their knowledge of Rome versus mine, and I'm like, holy crap, I don't know anything. Like, I've got so much to go. I don't really know the leaders all that well and the stories. It's just it's bad. It's not good. I need to work up on it. But to be honest, one of the reasons why I don't know that much is I'm not super interested, not to be, controversial. I'm not like really into Rome. I like Rome. It's kind of funny. I mean, you could maybe look back at this, and maybe that's why I didn't enjoy all that much the city of Rome in Italy. I was controversially pretty critical of the city of Rome in Italy. But you know what? The more I talk to people, the more I've heard my sentiments towards Rome echoed to me, that they didn't really enjoy it that much either. But maybe if I was more of a Roman history fan, I would have enjoyed the city of Rome a little bit more. Now, that's not to say I don't, like it. I obviously, when growing up, I love the movie Gladiator. I like to consume content about Rome. I love the fact that they freaking filled the Colosseum with water. That's crazy. And did like sea battles. The ideas behind Rome, really interesting. The goals, the memes about how when the Romans went into the British Isles and the swamp people that they they came across. I don't know. I know probably more about Rome than the random person on the street, but I'm so far from an expert. Anyways, that's the classical era, the time between 500 BC and 500 AD. We're going to skip some time period. I'm just realizing that there's a pretty big time. What is that called after that? I guess it's the medieval point. Yeah, I guess you can classify that as like the early medieval ages, the, early dark ages, whatever you want to call it. So some notable things that I'm thinking about during that time. You have the Viking invasion. You have the Normans. The HRE, things kind of break down in Europe for a time there. This is where it probably gets the most controversial. This is the thing that I don't love it. I don't love it. And it's weird because I actually really love the Crusader Kings games, Paradox Crusader Kings games. If I had to pick a game franchise that Paradox makes that's my favorite to play, it actually might be CK2 and 3. Like, just on my own. I obviously have not made much CK Crusader Kings content. Crusader Kings is basically just the map simulation game of that time period, the medieval times. I love to play it. But yeah, like studying about it, I was just thinking about the other day, I really don't know that much. If there was a time machine that like randomly blasted me back to any other time in history, I think that I'd be the most screwed in the medieval times, at least in terms of like how much I can be like this weird prophet that can tell the people of that time what's about to happen. I'd be screwed if you dropped me into the medieval times because I don't really know. I mean, you got the 100 Years' War, yeah, the Vikings, the Crusades. Don't even get me started about the Crusades. I don't know a whole lot about that. You have the rise of Islam and the Reconquista of Iberia. I guess there are certain topics. I guess I got to just break it down by certain events, because when you zoom out and look at the era as a whole, it gets I think it's easy for me to be like, oh, I didn't really like this era. But then when you focus on certain events, I'm like, oh, I like that, or oh, I like that. So yeah, the Vikings are kind of fun to talk about. I guess it just kind of depends. Charlemagne's Empire is another one to think about. I'm completely skipping over ancient Egypt. I do like ancient Egypt stuff. I was kind of in my head, I'm like ancient Greece, Rome, but yeah, Mesopotamia too. I forgot to talk about them. The Sumerians, dang. There's a couple things that I forget to mention before, but okay. The Renaissance, love this stuff. I love this stuff. The Renaissance and the colonial age that followed after that. Again, a lot of this is because I love a Paradox game called Europa Universalis. that might be my favorite game to play on camera. And I just learned so much about that time period of history from that game to start. It kind of lit the fire so that I could go and do my own research. I really like this time period a lot more than people I think expect. There's not a whole lot of memes about it. I mean, I guess so when it comes to like, Christopher Columbus and sailing, pirates, the rise of the Ottomans. But this might be the dark horse for one of my favorite eras. If I had to, like minus the theories of like prehistory and Stone Age times and things like that, if you minus like the theoretical discussions you can have with that time period, then it would be this stuff, the Renaissance and the colonial age, which I guess are kind of connected. They kind of obviously lead into each other. So this would probably be the one that I choose as my second place spot. It's just a fun time period. I mean, dang, there was so much going on. A lot of the world first started becoming connected globally. So there was a lot of ideas that were getting flashed around, and it's literally, they call it the age of discovery for a reason. I think that's so fun, and I think that sparks my interest in space because that's the next, that's the final frontier, they say. In those times, like that is the closest humans are going to get to venturing out into something like the colonial ages when they were really discovering, okay, what do we live on? Like what else is out there? That's going to be the closest we ever get to that. So I love talking about this topic, and I feel like I don't get to talk about it too much on my channel. I feel like there's not a lot of interest in my audience on this time period. Kind of, but it's not like super, super popular as some of more than the other topics that I'm about to talk about. Next up, I'm going to just jump into the Napoleonic era and then the Victorian era that kind of follows up that, because there is a bit of a difference there. I love talking Napoleon. I think that has been maybe the fastest topic that has moved up in my ranking of how much I like to talk about that aspect of history. Napoleon was such an interesting guy, and it's kind of nice to not, after Hitler, it's you talk about massive figures inside of Europe. It's interesting to talk about Napoleon because there's such a gray opinion about him. I mean, dang, I'm trying to think, like, are there like straight up Napoleon haters? I guess there's probably some British. Yeah, there's definitely some straight up Napoleon haters. I've just seen all sorts of weird things, and I just think it's interesting to see how gray, I guess, it is. I mean, let's be real, most of the general public doesn't really think about it. They probably kind of have a slightly positive view of Napoleon. I have no data to back that up. I'm just as a complete guess. But I feel like with the memes and everything like that, they probably liked just how powerful Napoleon became. But I do love discussing Napoleon's history. I love alternative history that talk about Napoleon because things could have gone so differently, and that would have just completely changed the world. Seeing how, history gets linked, the events that lead up to Napoleon, and then obviously Napoleon's fall, I think it's fascinating to see all that stuff. And then to lead into it, the Victorian era, the time period between, after Napoleon's fall, basically the 1800s, honestly, if we're going to be real, up until like World War I. I love that stuff too. I don't think I love it as much as the colonial age, but that might be a close third or fourth. It's just a very interesting. It's obviously, I always think of steampunk, very steampunk vibes. Just the world. I think people like don't give that time, the people that lived in that time, enough credit. They knew a lot more than. I think it's easy to look back at like, oh yeah, the human beings that lived 150 years ago, they couldn't have been that smart, right? Because they didn't have access to a whole lot. But man, you have to think like that set the groundwork for a lot of modern technology and also ideas and policies, politics. There was a lot of interesting developments that came out of that time period. Obviously, a lot of bad things too, because obviously this all leads up to World War I. Here we go. So in terms of the world wars, I know a lot of people, I think the mainstream opinion in the history community is to like World War I more than World War II. And to be quite honest, that's not me. I do like to talk about World War I. It's not to say that I don't like to talk about World War I, but I just prefer World War II personally. I still think World War II is very interesting, and I don't really know why. Maybe because it was closer. I think it's harder for me to wrap my head around the politics of World War I, the ideas that were flashing around, and it's harder for me to connect modern day times to World War I. Obviously, we're going to be more connected to World War II because of the fallout of World War II. But that's not to say I don't love World War I. Love talking about World War I. I mean, dang, half the memes I feel like, and when I do like history meme reviews, it's World War II and then World War I, because you have to talk about the prequel. It's literally the prequel to the biggest event in human history. So the Archduke, the weird diplomatic alliances. I think World War I is so fun for alt history. I don't like World War II alt history that much. World War I alt history is way more interesting because I feel like there's a lot more to be done there. I mean, we can't even begin to wrap our heads around how different Earth would be if World War I plays out any differently than it did. I mean, all the events. I mean, dang, I saw this great TikTok about, it was kind of dumb, but it was also a funny TikTok about how like the Archduke Franz Ferdinand getting killed led to such an insane chain of events. Just one guy that kills that other guy. The events that took place in human history, it's unimaginable. It's like insane. It's insane. Like all that took place. Now, I have kind of made arguments that probably World War I would have eventually happened in a maybe different thing. You know, Germany was ready to pick up some more extra territory. The world was kind of already ready for something. I think probably Franz Ferdinand was just, a good excuse. But who knows? I mean, you could argue different things. The interwar period between World War I and World War II, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, in terms of U.S. history, you got the Golden Age, you got the Great 20s, the Roaring 20s, and then the Great Depression that follows right after that. I like the Weimar Republic is a fascinating thing to study because then you have the rise of the Nazis and things like that. Stagnation that happens with like France and the UK. Like Japan invading China, the warlord period. Yeah, it's tough, but yeah, unsurprisingly, just going to say it right now, this shouldn't be a shocker. Favorite thing to talk about is World War II. It just is. Hate to be such a history normie there, but that's just the facts. I like World War II history. And I think that's very obvious for my videos. If I'm reviewing history memes, I love talking about World War II. Even if it's like a bad take history meme, even just to look at a meme and be like, hey, I just want to discuss this. Even if it's like not a very popular meme that's just like talking about the subject of World War II and it wasn't very popular, but it leads the door to a conversation, I'm all about that. So that stuff's fun. I don't love the Cold War as much as World War II. There's just so much that go on during the Cold War era between 1945 and 1990, 1991. I mean, there's little events that are interesting. Vietnam, fun fact, I love Vietnam documentaries. I love the Ken Burns 10-part series of the Vietnam War. That's fascinating to me. I like learning about events that I wasn't around for. So, things from the 80s. Chernobyl. There's so much. I mean, dang, there's so much to talk about during the Cold War. It's hard. I prefer late Cold War stuff than like early Cold War stuff. 1950s, the McCarthyism, that was kind of interesting, kind of crazy. The technological race between the two. I don't know. Yeah, the way that the people of those times tried to like predict when World War III would take place because they were really anticipating that the Soviets or the U.S., they were both waiting for a whole new generation of young men to grow because World War II killed so many people. They were waiting for a whole new manpower plethora to pull from, supply or whatever you want to call it, to pull from, that a lot of people really thought that World War III would break out in the 60s or early 70s. So I can't imagine what they were thinking during the Cuban Missile Crisis. No wonder everyone was just like, oh, it's happening. This is it. So yeah, and then I don't even think you can say anything after the Cold War is, it is history. It is history. I like to review those topics, by myself, the war on terror, the U.S., what the U.S. did with Afghanistan. I mean, I like to review those topics on my own, but I don't really like to talk about that stuff in video. The recession, the Great Recession, things like that. that's I don't know, it gets less interesting to me, that stuff, but I like to review that stuff on my own. And it's funny, if I do this for long enough, we'll eventually have to talk about that stuff, maybe another 10 years, and we can dive into those memes, but we'll see. Thanks for watching.